Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Tier List Thursday with the Cold Hard Truth podcast. And in this episode, we're not going off a position. We're not doing a player tier list. In this video, we are going to be doing NFL defenses. I'm going to be ranking all 32 NFL defensive units. I have all my teams down here in alphabetical order. And as you can see here, I have 6 tiers. I have the elite or the S tier, great, good, meh, average tier. And then we have bad, and then just straight up trash. So those are all my tiers. I'm excited. Let's get right into it. If you enjoy our tier list Thursdays, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the Cold Hard Truth podcast, and make sure you hit that bell so you're notified whenever we drop a video. But let's get right into it. And the first team up is the San Francisco 49ers. And obviously last year, the 49ers were just doomed when it came to injury luck last year. So obviously a big factor in this is them getting healthy, especially Nick Bosa returning to the lineup. That will elevate this defensive line and the defense as a whole. You have one of the best linebacker duos in the NFL. I'd say top 3 with Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw. In free agency, they added Samson Ebukam. They also added Maurice Hurst and Arden Key to their defensive line. And then really the only concern for me is the secondary. They did draft Ambry Thomas and Diamador Lenoir, maybe to fill that cornerback 2 spot, because opposite of Jason Verrett, it's pretty much a question mark. K'Wan Williams, one of the better nickel corners in the game. And then at safety, it's also a question mark for me. So honestly, I'm kind of hoping as a Niner fan that the defensive line can mask the secondary's flaws. So I'm inclined to put the San Francisco 49ers in that great tier. They could be in that good tier if you wanted it, but I'm going to be a little bit generous in this video. So I'm going to put the 49ers in that great tier. Moving on to the Chicago Bears. The Bears, last year they kind of surprised me by making the wild card. Obviously it was an expanded playoffs, but really the defense kind of masked how bad that offense was. Now, you did lose Kyle Fuller in free agency. He signed with the Broncos. I'm pretty sure they signed Desmond Trufant, so that may help. Of course, you're going to bank on Jalen Johnson to potentially make a step further in his development. Not exactly a breakout year, but Jalen Johnson should do better this year. You also lost Roy Robertson Harris. He signed with the Jaguars. So it's a good defense. I'd still say it's a quality defense. As I'm looking on the notes on my phone, I'm inclined to put them in, I'd say tier 3. I'd say it's a good team, a good defense, but really it's not as noteworthy as the past 2 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a regression from this defense this year. Now with the Cincinnati Bengals, a lot of people focus on their offense led by Joe Burrow. Obviously, they drafted Jamar Chase and Jackson Carman with their first 2 picks in the draft. They did draft Joseph Osai in the 3rd round. They also got Cameron Sample. So it's a pair of edge rushers right there. Outside of those picks, I'm not really sure what else they did to improve the defense. Looking at the defensive line, Trey Hendrickson pretty much taking Carl Lawson's spot, which I'm not a big fan of. I think Carl Lawson was better because I'd take consistency over one breakout year all day. William Jackson is gone. He is with the football team now. The Bengals did sign Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie, but still big losses. Larry Ogunjobi was a good signing. I actually like that, but where do I put them? I think this isn't really the best defense out there. I'd probably go in that bad tier. Sorry, Bengals fans, but I think it's a bad tier for me just because I didn't really like what they did in free agency. It's definitely a defense on the rise per se, but for 2021, not the best. And moving on to the Buffalo Bills, coming off that AFC Championship game appearance, this is a good defense. The defensive line, first of all, they made huge additions in the draft with Gregory Rousseau and Carlos Basham. Of course, they still have veterans on that defensive line. We look at Mario Addison. We look at Jerry Hughes. AJ Epinesa is on that defensive line. It's very interesting because the Bills are focused on beating the Chiefs, of course, and I believe that one of the ways to beat the Chiefs is getting interior pressure on Mahomes, just getting pressure in general. We saw that in the Super Bowl. So the Bills were obviously attacking that need first. So I like the defensive line. The secondary, of course, you have Tre'Davious White, one of the best lockdown corners in football. I love the safety tandem of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I'd say overall, it's a good defense. I do want to see how this defensive line is. So that's why I'm going to put them in good. Obviously, if the defensive line lives up to their potential, that could be moved into great or elite. But I think good is a fair placement for now. The Denver Broncos. This is an intriguing defense to rank because they drafted Patrick Surtain at number 9. I believe they should have went for a quarterback, but Patrick Surtain isn't the worst pick out there. Look, Denver has a very good secondary. They signed Kyle Fuller. They signed Ronald Darby. As I said before, they drafted Surtain. Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in football. Kareem Jackson, a very nice compliment to Simmons. This is a very underrated defense. Bradley Chubb is returning. They still have Von Miller. They drafted Baron Browning. Look, in 2015, really the defense was what willed them to that Super Bowl. And obviously them winning it was based off of Von Miller's performance in the Super Bowl. So Denver is a very defense-focused team, which is why I like this defense a lot. I think I'm going to put them in that great tier. Still no S-tier defense yet, but the Broncos defense is being slept on. Pretty much the entire Broncos team is being slept on, aside from the quarterback position. But I digress. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people view the Browns as one of the biggest winners of free agency and the draft, I guess the offseason as a whole. Just looking at that secondary first, John Johnson, great signing, one of the smartest safeties in the league, one of the best safeties. He'll be there for the next 3 years. They also got Troy Hill from the Rams. Greedy Williams will be back in the lineup. Obviously, Denzel Ward, one of the best corners in the game. Looking at the defensive line, they needed a replacement for Olivier Vernon, and they got Jadeveon Clowney. In my mind, Clowney is a great run stopper, not the best pass rusher. So if you're expecting sack numbers from Clowney, I wouldn't have my hopes up very high if I was a Browns fan. And of course, looking at their draft, Greg Newsome at corner was a great pick when you considered that they got JOK in the second round. You know, arguably the best linebacking prospect in the entire draft. Some people had him over Micah Parsons. Everyone thought he was going to go day one, but he ended up falling to the Browns. Or actually, my bad, the Browns traded up to select him. And now, like, the Browns have a lot of upside. This defense looking pretty good. I'd say I'm going to go good. I'm going to go good with this defense. Mainly because I want to see how Greedy Williams comes back. I want to see how this secondary performs. I trust that the D-line will do their thing. I forgot to even mention Myles Garrett, arguably the best pass rusher in football alongside TJ Watt. So I like it. I think the Browns have a good defense. I think I just have to see how those missing pieces come back, Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams. So that's kind of what's restricting me from putting them in that great or elite category. The Buccaneers are next. I mean, what really needs to be said? This is the best defense in football, in my mind. We all saw the Super Bowl. We all know what happened. They brought back everyone. This is the best defense in football. They drafted Joe Tryon. Very high ceiling for him. I think the Bucs can develop him well. Look, barring injuries or, anything that would be surprising, this is going to be the best defense in the NFL. And this is going to be obviously in my S tier. The Arizona Cardinals are up next. The Cardinals defense is interesting. Looking at the D-line first, of course, they signed JJ Watt. He will pair alongside Chandler Jones. They drafted Zaven Collins, who will be playing linebacker, but I mean, he can line up all over the field. He's basically another Isaiah Simmons. And speaking of Isaiah Simmons, I hope the Cardinals develop him properly. He could see a breakout year in year 2. And the secondary, they lost Patrick Peterson. They lost Dre Kirkpatrick. They did sign Malcolm Butler, but really outside of Byron Murphy, it's pretty thin. And obviously you have Budda Baker at safety, so that's fine. But the cornerback spot is pretty thin. I don't know how much I like the Zaven Collins pick, but I think they do have a plan for him in mind. I don't really know how I feel about this Cardinals defense, honestly. I'm going to go in that meh tier. So pretty average. Still don't have anything in that trash category, which is good. I mean, I'm being a bit generous here. But I don't know how I feel about the Cardinals defense just yet. Because obviously Chandler Jones is coming back from injury as well, which we have to keep in mind. So a lot of questions. I think that fourth tier is the place to put them. The Los Angeles Chargers are the next team up. And obviously we all know with Justin Herbert, the offense is going to be nice. But you have a new head coach, Brandon Staley, pretty much the guy behind the Rams' top-ranked defense. He was their defensive coordinator. So obviously the Chargers are looking to make a big impact on defense to help out Herbert. The Chargers got Asante Samuel Jr. in the draft. Great corner. A lot of people thought he'd go first round, but he had some size concerns, so he slipped. And then they got Chris Rumpf out of Duke, I believe. I forget if it was Duke or Kentucky. But he'll play on the edge. And then also you're getting Derwin James back. So really, health is my concern here. If this Chargers defense stays healthy, this is a great defense. Do I have faith in them to stay healthy? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Another thing is Joey Bosa hasn't stayed healthy either. He hasn't started 16 games over the past 3 seasons. So if he stays healthy, if this whole defense can stay healthy, I would say this is a great or good defense. For right now, I'm going to put them right alongside the Cardinals. I think that's fair enough. I may be being a little harsh on the Chargers, but honestly, meh. It's not great. It's not bad. I think that's fair. The Kansas City Chiefs are the next team up on the clock. And look, the big focus of this offseason was improving the offensive line. But on defense, they did make some moves. They got Nick Bolton, a great playmaking linebacker. I forget what round they drafted him in. I think it was the 2nd round. They drafted Joshua Kando. They signed Jaron Reed in free agency, which was a great add to their defensive line. It was a bargain of a deal too. I think they signed him $5.5 million. Look, the defense is not as bad as people say. It's really not that bad. L'Jarius Sneed in the secondary, Tyrann Mathieu, one of the best safeties in football. I'm inclined to put them in that good tier. I think this is a good defense. I expect the Chiefs to have an excellent year this year. I don't think they're going to go through, a supposed Super Bowl hangover of sorts. And I think this defense will take a big step forward. Obviously, they're kind of well-rounded at all 3 spots. You could say the secondary is the weakest point, especially at corner, but I don't think so. I think the linebacking core. But the Kansas City Chiefs have a good defense. The Indianapolis Colts are next up. And last year, this defense definitely performed past expectations, I'd say. In the draft, they pick up Kwity Paye, one of the best edge rushers in the class. Dayo Odingbo, people thought he'd go, first round, but he did have a torn Achilles, so he did slip to day 2. They drafted Sean Davis. And honestly, I think this defense will regress just a little bit. It won't be anything crazy. They're going to bring back Xavier Rhodes. I think this is a great defense. I think it's fair to put them in that great tier. I think there's still potential that hasn't been tapped with this Colts group, but I do think that they're going to take a little step back. This isn't going to be the best defense in football. This isn't going to be anything crazy, but it's still a great defense. I can't knock it. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. Oh my goodness. It was a rough season for the Cowboys defense. The offense just had to keep them in games. Obviously, in the first round, they get Micah Parsons. It's a linebacker. Obviously, you still have Jalen Smith and LVE, so their futures are in question with this Parsons pick. But a lot of people like Micah Parsons. People are saying he's already, the favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. That award's always hard to predict, so I wouldn't mind it. But he's definitely going to be a playmaker for Dallas. The secondary is awful. It's just awful. Kelvin Joseph was their pick. Not my favorite. He's still very raw as a prospect, and I would have liked someone more proven next to Trevon Diggs. And at safety, the Cowboys don't normally address safety, so nothing really needs to be said there. They're moving Keanu Neal to linebacker. They also drafted Jabril Cox, so I don't know what's going on with the linebacker position. The Cowboys just seem to be obsessed with it. Yeah, I'm gonna go trash. I'm not a fan of this Cowboys defense. The more I kind of speak on it, it's not great. The Miami Dolphins, next up. Look, last year, this defense pretty much made up for a lack of offense. And that's a testament to Brian Flores' play calling and the coaching staff, but also the talent on defense. Miami selected Jalen Phillips. He was the first pass rusher off the board at number 18. Very talented, very raw. He's been injured in the past, so hopefully he can stay healthy, but he can make an immediate impact, especially on that defensive line. In the second round, they got Javon Holland. He won't line up only at safety. He'll play multiple positions, so I like the pick. The pieces are definitely in place for the Dolphins to even further improve on what they did last year. So honestly, S tier for me. I'm going to put some respect on the Dolphins' name. This is a very good defense, one that I believe in a lot. And it should be said, just a few days ago, they re-signed, it was a Jerome Baker, and I think that was great for them too. He made an immediate impact last year. I'm excited for the future of Miami, and a lot of that has to do with this defense. Do I think they're going to be a top 5 defense next year? I would say so, if that was a bold prediction or not. I think they're going to be a top 5 defense next year. And obviously, that is going to alleviate some pressure off of Tua Tagovailoa. The Eagles had a rough offseason, mainly because Howie Roseman was tasked with, trying to fix a defense with a low salary cap number. So obviously, Roseman had to let some players go on defense. Didn't have enough cash to sign new ones. They did sign Anthony Harris. They signed Eric Wilson to pretty cheap deals. Milton Williams was drafted in the 3rd round. But honestly, it's a stretch to say that the Eagles are going to be above average as a defense in 2021. Just too many holes that honestly they couldn't fill just because, as I said, salary cap issues. So I'm not going to say trash because, there are some aspects about the Eagles that I like, especially that D-line with Fletcher Cox, Derek Barnett. But I'm gonna say it's pretty bad. The Falcons defense, how do I describe this? The Falcons defense was straight up burnt toast last year. It's the reason they blew so many leads. It's the reason they lost. They had a terrible pass rush, a terrible secondary, and I don't think they did a good job this year really addressing the defense, which is why I was saying they should trade back to get more draft capital, get the best defensive player on the board. They could have potentially had Patrick Surtain. He would have paired nicely with AJ Terrell, but obviously they didn't do that. They got Richie Grant in the 2nd round, which isn't bad. The pass rush is still not great. I'm going to go trash. There's not really much about the Falcons that I like on defense. But, it's a defense that's on the rise. Again, the Falcons were put in cap hell. We said it in our last podcast episode, but they had to make that Julio Jones trade just to sign their draft class. So I don't blame them that much for not fixing the defense all the way, but there were definitely opportunities for them to do so. But next up, the New York Giants. The Giants defense pretty much kept them in the NFC East running because they were faced with a lot of injuries on offense. And it's not only injuries, the offense wasn't playing up to its potential. But the defense, it got better during the offseason. It should be a lot better in 2021. They got Azeez Ojulari in the 2nd round. They drafted Aaron Robinson at corner in the 3rd. The defensive line, it's still going to remain good because they signed Leonard Williams to a huge deal. They got Danny Shelton, Ifedi Odenigbo. And James Bradbury and Adoree Jackson are two great corners. So I expect this Giants defense to be even better than they were last year. I think they're ready to compete. It's kind of just on the offense to match it. So honestly, I'm not going to say elite. I'll say they're great. I think that's a fair place to put them. Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a new era in Duval County. Look, there's a lot of upside with the Jaguars. We touched on it in our podcast episode, but this defense, not great. They did sign Shaquille Griffin, so I think the secondary will be better. They also got Rayshon Jenkins at safety. They signed Roy Robertson Harris away from the Bears, so the defensive line will be a bit better. They drafted Tyson Campbell in the second round. I think that was their best pickup on defense. They got Andre Cisco, go Orange. Jay Tufele, defensive tackle out of USC. And then Jordan Smith, I believe, at defensive end. They could all play some key roles, but it's a very young defense. I'll put them in that bad tier. I don't think they're trash. They did make some upgrades, but it's still not the best defense. It's one that certainly needs a bit more retooling and rebuilding. The Jets defense is pretty intriguing. Robert Saleh is now the man in charge of this Jets defense. And of course, we all know what he did with that San Francisco 49ers defense. The defensive line is really good. You get a great pass rusher in Carl Lawson, Sheldon Rankins, great nose tackle. I like the signing of LaMarcus Joyner at safety. They signed Jared Davis at linebacker. It's still a pretty young roster, so I don't expect the Jets to put it all together this year, especially on defense. But I'd say, it's a pretty average defense for now. I'd say meh, because the defensive line, it has potential to be a top 5 D line. I would say that it's a great defensive line, but everywhere else still needs some rebuilding. So I think they're just average. Yeah, I'm going to put the Lions in trash. I'm just going to say that ahead of time. Probably the worst defense in football last year. Do I really expect them to make a big jump next year? No. Even with the new regime, I don't think it's going to happen. Aaron Glenn is the new defensive coordinator in town. They signed Alex Anzalone, Quinton Dunbar. They drafted Alan McNeil and Afatu Melifonwu. Again, go Orange. Shout out to Melifonwu, but I don't think they're going to make a tremendous impact in year one, so I'm just going to say trash. It's not really a good defense at all. But hey, the Lions are rebuilding. You can only go up. You can only go up. The focus of the Green Bay Packers right now is on Aaron Rodgers. What's going to happen with him? Will he get traded? Will Jordan Love be the man in charge of the Packers offense? But the defense isn't absolutely terrible. I don't like the move to bring back Kevin King. We all saw what happened in that NFC Championship game. It was absolutely terrible. They did draft Eric Stokes, so that may take some pressure off of Kevin King. So that makes the situation a bit better. It won't be one of the league's best defenses, but honestly, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. Now, my question is, do I go average or do I go good? I'm going to go good. I think it's a good defense. One that's improved over this past offseason. And yeah, I think it's a good defense. I will start this by saying I love Brian Burns. I think Brian Burns is going to have a massive breakout year this year. But outside of Brian Burns, this defense for the Panthers, it's pretty average. They decided to go with J.C. Horn over Patrick Surtain at number 8, a selection that, I don't mind. I've been high on J.C. Horn throughout the entire draft process. Davion Nixon was chosen in the 5th round. And in free agency, they did sign A.J. Bouye. Denzel Perryman was another signing. Hassan Reddick. I like the cornerback duo of J.C. Horn and A.J. Bouye, but I think safety could stand to improve. Interior D-line could stand to improve. You do need some more help around Brian Burns. I'd say this defense is pretty average. I still think they're a year or two away from being, in that great or elite category. But it's definitely a defense that we should be keeping our eyes on in the next couple of years. Now, you guys may disagree with where I'm going to put the New England Patriots, because a lot of you think that the return of Dante Hightower is going to give this defense a tremendous boost. And they also got Matt Judon, Calvin Noy. They drafted Christian Barmore, as well as Ronnie Perkins on the edge. I think this defense will be a bit better than it was last year, but I don't think it's, in that elite category still. I think it's a great defense, but just not elite. So I do think Dante Hightower coming back will make a big difference, but is it enough to push them in that S category? I don't think so. I'll put them in great. The Raiders defense last year was straight up abysmal. They did sign Yannick Ngakoue. I really like that move. Of course, the pass rush was a big problem last year. Only 21 sacks. That's not great. They also signed Casey Hayward. They signed Solomon Thomas away from the 49ers. Quentin Jefferson. Trevon Merrick was a straight up steal in the draft. A lot of people thought he was the best safety. A lot of people thought, he was a first round pick, but he ended up going in the second round, number 43. The Raiders did trade up to get him. They drafted a defensive end in the third round. They also got Divine Diablo in the third round. Look, there's a lot of upside, but this is a new defensive coordinator, first of all, with Gus Bradley. And I don't think he's going to pull it all together in the first year. So I'm going to say it's a bad defense, not horrendous, but still pretty bad. The Rams are coming off being the top-ranked defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed and yards allowed. But they did lose Brandon Staley, which is going to be a bigger loss than some people may think. John Johnson is gone. Troy Hill is gone. I don't know how Raheem Morris is going to do as the defensive coordinator of the Rams. They didn't have a first-round pick this year. I mean, surprise. They never have a first-round pick. They got Ernest Jones in the third round, Robert Rochelle at corner in the fourth round. Both of those picks I liked a bit. I don't think this defense is necessarily elite anymore, but I will say they're great. There's not many defenses that I'm going to be putting in that elite category. I'm sorry if you guys expected something more exciting, but it's tough. You know what? Just because they're, it's tough. I'm going to go great. If you want to put them elite, you can. I wouldn't mind it. But they did lose some key pieces this offseason. Ultimately, that's forcing me to put them in that great tier. The Baltimore Ravens are next up. Look, they always field an elite defense. That's just a Ravens thing. So they lost Matt Judon. They lost Yannick Ngakoue. They lost Jahad Ward. So right now, your best edge rusher is potentially Odafe Owe. You do have Jalen Ferguson and Tyus Bowser. Pernell McPhee is still on that roster. They could go out and sign an edge or someone on the defensive line if they wanted some help there. They did draft Shaun Wade in the fifth round. I remember that. But honestly, I'm actually going to put Baltimore in that elite tier just because while these are what I'm ranking the defenses as of right now, at the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if Baltimore has a top 5 defense. They always field an elite defense, no matter what the personnel is, no matter who's on that coaching staff, no matter, it's just a Ravens thing, So I'm going to go elite for Baltimore. Washington, also, I'm going to go elite. And Washington's D-line is just ferocious. Straight up ferocious. I like drafting Jamin Davis. He was a guy that was rising throughout the draft process on everyone's big boards. Washington's defensive line is loaded. That should help the secondary out. Benjamin St-Juste was a great pick. William Jackson was a great signing, especially because he lost Ronald Darby. But overall, I think the football team had a great offseason on both sides of the ball. So I think they're going to continue where they left off last year. Obviously, they rode the back of that defense into the playoffs as a wild card. And I don't expect anything really different this year, so I'm going to go elite for Washington. Now, we want to talk about all these teams that were hurt by cap space. The Saints were down horrendous. They basically had to let go of a lot of key defenders, including Trey Hendrickson. They did draft Peyton Turner. Not my favorite pick, honestly. But of course, you did want someone opposite of Cam Jordan, and they got that. They drafted Pete Werner. And they also drafted Paulson Adebo, a corner out of Stanford. So they have a guy to pair with Marshawn Lattimore now. Look, if the Saints have a top 10 defense this year, that's incredible. Because they were pretty much in the dumps when it came to free agency. And obviously the Saints are good at drafting. So while I don't like the Peyton Turner pick, I'm not going to write Peyton Turner off, because I think the Saints can develop into a nice edge rusher. But in terms of where I put them, I'm going to put them in that good category. I don't think it's necessarily average or below average. It's good, though. They did lose some key defenders, which worries me, but I think they should be good this year. If we remember correctly, the Seattle Seahawks defense was absolutely horrendous at the start of last year. And ultimately, you could argue that's what brought them down towards the end of the year and heading into the playoffs, as they lost that wildcard game to the Rams. The Seahawks didn't have draft capital. They only had 3 picks. They did draft Trey Brown with one of those 3 picks. They lost Shaquille Griffin, but I think they wanted to replace him by signing Ahkello Witherspoon. Not the greatest replacement from a Niner fan. They also got Kerry Hyder Jr. He had a great year with the Niners. Who knows? Maybe he might produce again with the Seahawks. But look, this defense is so far removed from the Legion of Boom era. But it's not going to be as bad as last year, but it's still pretty bad. So I'm going to put them in that bad tier. I could move them up to average, but this is a below average defense in my mind. As we all know, the Steelers had an amazing defense in 2020. Maybe it faltered down the stretch, but they did lose some key defenders. Bud Dupree is gone. Mike Hilton is gone. They still have TJ Watt, arguably one of the best pass rushers in football. In the draft, I'm pretty sure they drafted a linebacker in the 4th round. What was his name? Buddy Johnson. Quincy Roche in the 6th round could be a steal. But I think it's safe to say they're in that. I'm gonna say elite for the Steelers. I think they're going to be potentially just as good as last year's squad. I don't see a huge difference occurring. If they do regress, it'll be by just a little bit. But I don't think the Steelers are going to see a huge drop-off in production. Texans fans, I'm sorry. You know where I'm going to put this defense. Trash. I literally cannot name that many players on the Texans defense. Obviously, they have Justin Reed. You have... yeah, trash. The Titans defense could be interesting. It's pretty much a boomer bust defense in every sense of the phrase. Caleb Farley is a boomer bust prospect. Bud Dupree was a boomer bust signing. I do like drafting Elijah Molden in the 3rd round. I do like that they signed Danico Autry. They took Rashad Weaver. That was a good pick as well. So I don't think it's above average necessarily, but it's not horrible. If this group does play up to their potential, I would say they're in that great tier. But as of right now, I'm going to put them in that average tier. I don't think it's horrific, but it's literally just average. It depends on what happens. They could bust or they could boom. The Vikings defense certainly has been flying under the radar, because last year, Mike Zimmer openly said this was not a good defense, one of the worst defenses that he's ever had. I'm pretty sure that's what he said exactly. But, I think they're going to be back in 2021. I like the signing of Patrick Peterson. They signed Xavier Woods. I like that signing too. Dalvin Tomlinson. They also have Michael Pierce on that defensive line. They just made a deal with Danielle Hunter. They took Chaz Surratt in the draft. Patrick Jones was also a selection in the draft. Look, they made a lot of additions, and if they stay healthy, this should be a much better squad in 2021 than it was in 2020. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and put them in. I'll put them in the great tier. I'll be a little bit generous to the Vikings, but this is pretty much my rankings. We got a good amount in each tier. A lot of were in great, but here we go. These are my rankings for every single NFL defense heading into 2021. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. It lets us know that you like this type of content, and we'll keep that going out for you. But I had a lot of fun doing this. Let me know in the comments what you would change. Obviously, you guys aren't going to agree with everything that I said in this video, but honestly, a lot of things could change between now and the season. So hope you guys enjoyed. I see you next time. Peace.